It was December 18th, 1981, just 7 days before Christmas, when a man searching for the perfect tree in the woods near Maddox Cove, Newfoundland, stumbled on something far more horrifying than a fallen fir. Beneath the fresh layer of snow, in a shallow dip between the trees, lay the body of a 14-year-old girl. Her face had been gently wiped clean. Her school books were tucked under one arm. She looked almost placed there, as if someone had tried to preserve a sense of innocence amidst unspeakable violence. Her name was Dana Bradley. She had disappeared 4 nights earlier, last seen getting into a car on Topsail Road while hitchhiking home for her mother's birthday. She never arrived. When her body was found, beaten, sexually assaulted, and eerily positioned, it shattered the innocence of an entire province. Police launched one of the largest investigations in Canadian history. Hundreds of interviews, thousands of leads, false confessions, misdirection, and decades later, still no answers. But someone out there knows what happened, because the killer didn't just take a life. He left behind a message, one buried in the snow, in silence, for nearly half a century. If you like deep investigations and dark mysteries, subscribe now. This case will shock you. St. John's, Newfoundland, 1981, a city cradled by the Atlantic, where salt-laced winds roll in from the sea, and children still played freely in neighborhoods flanked by spruce trees and steep hills. Life moved a little slower here. People knew each other. Doors stayed unlocked. The island had a rhythm all its own, isolated, weathered, and tight-knit. In winter, the snow came early and stayed deep, blanketing everything in quiet. Dana Nicole Bradley lived in this world. She was 14, the kind of girl people remembered instantly. Long brown hair, warm eyes, and a smile that held just enough teenage mischief to make her magnetic. She was popular, but not boastful, responsible beyond her years. Her friends described her as someone who looked out for others, who studied hard, and who adored her family. That Monday, December 14th, was a day like any other, at least at first. Dana had spent the afternoon visiting a friend in the west end of St. John's. As the sun dipped early beneath the horizon, she started her journey home. It was her mother's birthday, and Dana didn't want to be late. But the Bradley home was several kilometers away, so she did what many teens in rural Canada did at the time. She hitchhiked. At around 5:20 p.m., multiple witnesses saw her on Topsail Road, a major route leading through the city's outskirts. Some saw her get into a light-colored, older model vehicle, possibly a Dodge Dart or Plymouth Valiant, dated between 1973 and 1976. That would be the last confirmed sighting of Dana Bradley alive. When she didn't arrive home that evening, panic set in quickly. This was not like her, not on her mother's birthday, not in the cold. Her family contacted police within hours, and by the next morning, flyers had begun appearing across the city. Her school, her friends, her neighbors, everyone began to search. For 4 days, there was nothing but silence. Snowfall came and went. Tips led nowhere. The streets grew quieter, the fear deeper. Parents kept their children inside. A heavy fog settled over the province, not of weather, but of worry. And then came the discovery. On December 18th, a man searching for a Christmas tree in the woods near Maddox Cove stumbled upon Dana's body. The location was remote, a forested trail just south of the city. She had been placed in what some investigators later called a burial-like position. Her body showed signs of trauma, but also of eerie care. Her face had been wiped clean. Her school books, which she had carried with her, were tucked under her arm, as though whoever left her there wanted to erase the violence, or worse, wanted to make her appear peaceful. The crime devastated Newfoundland. The innocence of the island, its sense of safety, was ruptured. Here was a bright, beloved girl, stolen in plain sight, murdered with brutality, and arranged with a kind of haunting tenderness. The imagery gripped the nation. Newspapers across Canada carried the story. People from far beyond the province joined the call for justice. Dana Bradley became more than a name. She became a symbol, a reminder that even in the safest places, darkness can slip in unnoticed. But no one knew just how complex and enduring this darkness would become. It began as an ordinary Monday, December 14th, 1981. Dana Bradley finished her visit with a friend in the west end of St. John's sometime before dusk. The streets were lightly dusted in snow, the air sharp with oncoming winter. She was heading east, back toward her family's home, planning to arrive in time for her mother's birthday celebration. But the walk was long, so, as she'd done before, Dana stood along Topsail Road and put out her thumb. Around 5:20 p.m., several witnesses spotted her near a gas station, trying to hitch a ride. A few minutes later, she was seen getting into a car. It was light-colored, beige, possibly faded white, a 1973 to 1976 Dodge Dart or Plymouth Valiant, older, nondescript, the kind of vehicle that could blend into any snowy parking lot. One witness even noted the car pulling out toward the highway. Then, nothing. Dana vanished. The streetlights flickered on. Darkness fell early, as it often does in Newfoundland winters. Her mother waited. Dinner sat untouched. A cake sat unlit. By nightfall, worry had curdled into fear. Dana had never been the kind to disappear. When the police were called that evening, they responded quickly. A missing child in December, especially one as responsible as Dana, was never taken lightly. Within 24 hours, search efforts began in earnest. Volunteers scoured roadsides and forest edges. Officers checked with hospitals, friends, businesses. Flyers were posted, but no sightings came in. Not a single clue. 4 days passed. On December 18th, a man ventured into the wooded trails near Maddox Cove Road, not far from the cliffs and coast. He was looking for a Christmas tree, but what he found, beneath the silence of the forest and a thin crust of snow, would bring the entire province to a halt. Lying, partially concealed among the evergreens, was a young girl's body. Her coat was still on. Her school books, worn, familiar, were nestled under her arm, as if she were on her way to class. Her face had been gently wiped clean. Her position was unnatural, peaceful, almost staged, as though someone had tried to preserve her dignity after stripping it away. But the scene told a darker truth. Dana had been struck in the head with blunt force, a fatal blow. There were signs of sexual assault, and yet nothing was chaotic. There were no signs of a struggle at the scene, no drag marks, no signs she had been killed there. Investigators quickly concluded she had been murdered elsewhere, then brought here, placed deliberately, almost ritualistically. The crime scene was cordoned off. News spread with the speed of grief. That same evening, Dana's identity was confirmed. Her parents, who had clung to hope for days, were shattered by the truth. A birthday they would never celebrate again. The details of her discovery sent shockwaves across Canada. The positioning of her body, the care, the contrast between brutality and tenderness, disturbed even the most seasoned detectives. It was as if her killer wanted to leave behind a message, one that spoke not only of violence but of control, of ownership. Police knew immediately they were dealing with a rare kind of predator, not opportunistic, calculated, someone who had managed to abduct a girl in daylight, evade all detection, and return her body to the woods with meticulous intent. As winter deepened and Christmas approached, Dana's murder became national news. In a province used to storms and shipwrecks, nothing had prepared the people of Newfoundland for this. A child killed, a community broken, and a crime scene that offered no immediate answers, only a terrible, echoing question. Who would do this? And more haunting still, how had they vanished so completely? From the moment Dana Bradley's body was recovered, the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary launched an unprecedented effort. It became, at the time, the most extensive investigation in the province's history. A dedicated task force was formed, and every resource was funneled into solving what was quickly being called the crime of a generation. Phase 1, the immediate aftermath. Over 800 vehicles were inspected, matching the witness description of the car Dana had entered. Light-colored sedans, especially Dodge Darts and Plymouth Valiants, were scrutinized one by one. Witnesses were re-interviewed. Some recalled a pale car pulling out near the intersection at an unusual speed. Others remembered a man behind the wheel, but no one could describe him clearly. No one had noted the license plate. Detectives canvassed neighborhoods, businesses, and gas stations along Topsail Road. Dana's friends were questioned, her movements retraced down to the hour. But despite the manpower, nothing tangible surfaced. No fingerprints, no weapon, no trace of where the crime had actually occurred. By spring of 1982, The task force had logged thousands of hours. Leads came in, but they scattered in all directions. A former convict living nearby, a drifter seen hitchhiking the same day, a series of local men whose cars vaguely matched the description. None led anywhere solid. Still, police pressed on. A psychological profile was developed. The RCMP joined the effort. The working theory: Dana had been abducted by someone familiar with the area, someone who could navigate back roads and forested trails, who could strike swiftly and leave no evidence behind, someone who had done this before or had planned it for a very long time. Then, 5 years later, a break, or so it seemed. In 1986, a man named David Grant Somerton walked into a police station and confessed to Dana's murder. He was calm, specific, claimed he had assaulted and killed her alone, that he had panicked and left her body in the woods. He gave what appeared to be accurate descriptions of the crime scene. For weeks, the province believed the case had been cracked, but the confession began to unravel under scrutiny. Somerton contradicted himself in later statements. Key details didn't match. He had no clear motive, and worse, when re-interviewed under caution, he claimed his confession had been coerced, that police had pressured and guided his words. Forensic evidence didn't connect him to the scene. DNA analysis, still in its infancy at the time, couldn't support or refute his involvement. Ultimately, he was charged only with public mischief. The murder charge never stuck. By the late 1980s, the case had gone cold, but it never disappeared, not in Newfoundland. Dana's photo remained on bulletin boards, her case file remained open, and her name still echoed in every local conversation about justice left undone. In the decades that followed, police reopened the case multiple times. Each time, new forensic methods were applied: fingerprint comparisons, trace evidence, and eventually, DNA. Hundreds of items were preserved, including clothing, biological samples, and evidence from the scene. Then, in 2016, hope flickered again. Using modern forensic techniques, investigators extracted a male DNA profile from evidence connected to Dana's body. It was not a match to Somerton, nor to any other known suspect. It was new, untouched, a foreign fingerprint in the snow. That DNA was uploaded to national and international databases, but no match came back. Still, it changed everything. The DNA gave investigators a tangible lead, an unambiguous profile. It proved that the killer had left something behind, that he had not been as invisible as once believed. And with the rise of genetic genealogy, there was a renewed possibility that the profile could lead to family members, and then to him. But time was not on their side. Over 40 years had passed. Memories faded. Witnesses died. The vehicle, if it even still existed, was long gone. Technology could only do so much without context. In 2021, new investigators were assigned to the case. They reviewed every file, re-examined every lead. They even reached out to the public again, hoping someone, anyone, might remember something buried by time. Some leads trickled in. A woman recalled seeing a man acting strangely near the Maddox Cove Trail around the time of Dana's disappearance. A retired officer claimed he had once spoken to a man who owned a similar car, but the man had since moved away. None of it was enough. So far, police had no leads, no motive, and no suspect. Yet the town wasn't sleeping easy. To this day, the RCMP remains tight-lipped about the status of the DNA, whether new matches are being investigated, whether suspects are under quiet surveillance. What is known is this: Dana's case is still open, and the file remains active, because in a forest just outside a quiet Canadian town, a child was laid to rest by someone who has never answered for it. And that person may still be watching, waiting, believing he got away with murder. The first major twist came not from evidence, but from a voice, a man stepping forward with a story the public had waited 5 years to hear. In 1986, David Grant Somerton walked into a police station and confessed to the murder of Dana Bradley. His statement was chilling. He described picking her up, assaulting her, killing her in a panic, leaving her in the woods. At first, investigators believed they had their man. He knew details not released to the public. He sounded calm, certain, contrite. For the Bradley family, it was a jolt of mixed emotions. Grief reopened, but now accompanied by the fragile hope of justice. Newspapers printed his name in bold. Talk shows debated motive. And for the first time in half a decade, the community exhaled. But the relief didn't last. As police pressed Somerton, inconsistencies emerged. In follow-up interviews, his narrative shifted. Timelines bent. Facts changed. He contradicted key forensic details, ones that couldn't have been faked. Eventually, Somerton recanted. He claimed his confession had been coerced. The detectives pressured him, filled in the blanks, wore him down. The case against him collapsed. No physical evidence tied him to Dana's murder. No witness ever placed him near Topsail Road that day. When DNA evidence was eventually tested years later, it confirmed what many already suspected. Somerton was not the killer. He was convicted only of public mischief for misleading police and quietly slipped out of the headlines. But the damage had been done. Trust in the investigation wavered. The community, once convinced of closure, was forced to return to square one. This twist changed everything. Comment below. Who do you think did it? For nearly 3 more decades, the case drifted between periods of renewed interest and cold silence. Then came the second twist, the one that rewired the entire trajectory of the investigation. In 2016, after years of painstaking evidence preservation, forensic teams extracted a full male DNA profile from materials collected during Dana's original autopsy. It was clean, untouched, unmistakable, and it didn't match Somerton or any other suspect the police had previously tested. The revelation was explosive. For the first time, police had a living genetic fingerprint, a biological ghost left behind by the killer. It was a thread, thin but undeniable, that could finally pull the case into the modern era. Hopes surged that, through familial DNA or emerging forensic genealogy methods, a name could be attached to the profile, that someone somewhere might be connected by blood. Investigators submitted the profile to both national and international DNA databases. They quietly partnered with labs known for solving historic cold cases through ancestry tracking. Names were examined, family trees traced, but no viable match emerged. Still, the presence of DNA was a revelation. It told the world something Dana's killer likely never imagined, that even in the early 1980s, he had left something behind, something science would one day find and maybe expose. Public interest spiked again. Media coverage reignited. The Bradley family, still haunted but hopeful, spoke out in renewed calls for justice. They urged the public to come forward, to recheck memories, to break long-held silences. Meanwhile, internet sleuths and cold case enthusiasts dove into the story. They dissected witness accounts, pored over vehicle models, created maps. Some speculated the killer may have worked in law enforcement or been familiar with investigative techniques, explaining how he evaded detection. Others wondered if he had struck before or after. Whispers emerged of a man who left the province shortly after Dana's murder, a quiet, solitary figure with a history of violence toward women. He was questioned once, decades ago, but never charged. Now, his name appeared again in online forums and local rumors, but official word from the RCMP remained tight-lipped. What's clear is this: the case is no longer just a memory, it's active. DNA sits in a database, files are reviewed, suspects, however faint, are still on paper, and one of them, perhaps someone now old, someone living quietly in a suburban street, knows exactly what happened in those woods in December 1981, and he's never said a word. 4 decades have passed, and still, the final truth remains locked away, somewhere between a winter road, a forgotten vehicle, and a wooded trail outside St. John's. The most enduring question in the murder of Dana Bradley isn't how she died, it's who planned it, who watched a 14-year-old girl walking down Topsail Road that evening and made a decision that would scar an entire province forever. Everything investigators know rests on a handful of moments: the sighting of the car, the position of her body, the presence of DNA. These fragments, small but sharp, are the only solid remains of a crime that was otherwise consumed by silence. Police believe Dana knew her killer, or at least didn't fear him. There were no signs of panic when she entered the car. No witnesses saw her resist. No one heard screams, which means this wasn't a random act of chaos. It was a planned abduction, hidden beneath the mask of normalcy. The placement of her body reinforced that theory. It wasn't careless. It wasn't hurried. Whoever left Dana in the woods had taken their time, cleaned her face, arranged her books, a gesture that feels more chilling than comforting, as if the killer wanted to control the narrative, even in death. And yet, he made a mistake. The DNA left behind, whether on her clothing, on her body, or in trace samples recovered by forensic teams, it told the one story the killer couldn't rewrite, that he had been there, that no matter how careful he was, something of him remained. But it hasn't been enough, not yet. Despite modern forensics, despite reanalysis of all physical evidence, no match has ever been found. The profile is complete, but it exists in a vacuum, anonymous, waiting. Some investigators have theorized that the killer is already dead, taking his secret with him to the grave. Others believe he is still alive, living in quiet terror that one day a letter will arrive, a knock at the door, a phone call. It's happened before. Cold cases far older than Dana's have been solved by a distant cousin submitting a DNA test to an ancestry website, by a lab technician noticing a familiar genetic sequence. All it takes is one match. Until then, the case remains one of Canada's most painful, unsolved crimes, and Dana, frozen forever at 14, remains more than a victim. She is a symbol of what was lost, of what was taken, of what still waits in the dark. Because someone out there remembers that night, remembers that car, remembers the sound of tires on snow, the silence of the woods, the weight of what they left behind. And someday, science, or conscience, may finally force them to answer. For Dana Bradley's family, time did not heal. It only deepened the silence. Her parents, devastated by grief, became reluctant symbols of a nation's sorrow. They fought, year after year, to keep Dana's name alive. Her father once said, "Every day is December 14th. For them, the calendar never moved forward. Her room remained untouched for years. Her birthday was never forgotten. Her presence, though absent, filled every corner of their home. The community, too, was forever changed. In St. John's, Dana's murder marked a loss of innocence. Parents stopped letting their children walk alone. Hitchhiking, a once common practice in Newfoundland, vanished almost overnight. Local schools began teaching safety measures. Town meetings turned somber, and in the quiet spaces of people's lives, fear settled in. But there was unity, too, in vigils, in fundraisers, in a shared refusal to let Dana be forgotten. Each anniversary brought renewed calls for justice. People left flowers in the woods where she was found. Strangers wrote letters. Police received hundreds of tips over the years, many from people who weren't even alive when Dana died, but who had grown up in her shadow. The legal system took note. Her case helped shape how Canadian law enforcement handled missing children. It contributed to the urgency behind early child abduction protocols and evidence preservation standards. Even decades later, her file was used in forensic training to show how cold cases can evolve with science. Dana Bradley's name became a fixture in Canadian true crime history, but it also became a quiet vow that some cases are never truly cold, as long as someone remembers. Her killer, wherever he is, may feel safe, untouched, hidden by years and snow and silence. But in Newfoundland and across the country, people still speak her name, still demand answers, because justice delayed is not always justice denied. Sometimes it just takes longer to arrive. Some say justice was done. Others say the real killer is still out there. Dana Bradley's case is more than a mystery. It's a fracture in the history of a town that once believed it was safe. It's a frozen moment in 1981, replayed every winter as snow begins to fall again over the same road she once walked. Her story lingers, not just in the files of detectives or in the strands of DNA waiting in a database, but in the minds of every Canadian who ever read her name and wondered how such a thing could happen, and how, still, no one has answered for it. The woods off Maddox Cove remain quiet, but the question echoes louder than ever. Who killed Dana Bradley, and when will they be found? Hit subscribe and watch our next story, one even darker than this.